Special edition. I'm Brad Pomerance on the Central Coast today. We are joined by Ian Parkinson. He is the sheriff for San Luis Obispo County. For many years, sir, we've been talking about a new jail for women, and it's finally opened. Congratulations.
Finally, thank you.
Tell us about what you had and what you now have.
Well, the old female facility was built in the 80s. It had a 43-bed capacity. Typically, in the last 8 years, we've been exceeding 100 females in custody. So we moved forward with an AB 900 project with the state in partnership to build about a $42 million facility, which includes both the female jail and the second phase is a new medical and programming space. So the new facility is about 193 beds and give us space for future growth.
And let's talk about what you just described, because under what we know as AB 109 and even some initiatives, 47 for example, what we're looking for with our county jails is programming. Because if you're in a county jail, it's likely not as serious an offense as if you were at a state facility. And so these folks are going to get out, and we presumably want them to be productive citizens. And so talk to us about the programming elements.
So that was one of the benefits of AB 109
Right.
that people often overlook, and we've talked about before. It gives us funding to be able to do the programs. So now we went from a facility that typically housed inmates for a year or less,
Right.
and now we have sentences many more years. So the idea was to shift a focus within the jail to offer programming. Well, when you have a facility that's built for inmates for under a year, you don't have that programming space. So this component of construction really involves in the female side programming space, in the medical facility programming space for male. So we're going to have the opportunity to actually train them and offer some type of job skill training.
So the medical space is for men and women?
Yes.
Okay, so and that's important because your men likewise will be, the sentences around 3 years instead of under 1. Is that what you're saying essentially?
I mean, the highest sentence we have is 12 years.
That's a whole other
But
conversation.
Generally, we're looking at having people 3 to 4 years
Yeah, and
on
so
average.
they could have medical issues and complications, and so it's important, like you said, to be able to help them both medically and then, I guess, psychologically, so that when they get out of the facility, they can move on.
Correct.
There's no doubt, who would have thunk that our sheriffs have been thrown really right into the deep end on questions of immigration.
Yes.
And there's no question the new administration is looking for local law enforcement to be involved in immigration enforcement. On the most basic level, because intuitively one could say, well, wait, you're a police officer, if someone's here illegally, let's get them out. You can facilitate that. It's more complicated.
Absolutely. And I don't think people fully realize that being in this country illegally is a federal civil violation, and it's not into the criminal element unless they've been convicted of a crime or removed from the country, and then when they return, then they can be charged criminally.
So it's a civil matter. I
It's
mean,
a
the first
civil
offense
matter.
is civil.
Correct. So the idea, shifted a number of years ago that it is fully a federal issue, and that we do not have authority to pick people up unless there is a warrant for immigration issues, or we subscribe to a MOU with the federal government under the 287G program that gives us that authority.
And we also know that California has taken a very strong position, this is even before the Trump years, to avoid becoming an immigration enforcement tool.
Absolutely.
You're a county sheriff, that's an arm of the state.
Yes.
And so you have certain laws that you have to look at, the Trust Act, the Truth Act, which really proscribes your interaction with immigration.
Absolutely. I mean, it instills a law, basically, for us that defines what we can and cannot do. So it limits our interaction with ICE, in a sense, to higher level violent crimes, which are prescribed under the Trust Act, and contact with ICE under the Truth Act. So we have not only an obligation to not be able to enforce immigration laws, but when you enter the Trust Act, the Truth Act, and case decisions, it really describes to us what we can and cannot do already.
What we know is that there are many jurisdictions up and down the state of California, throughout the country, that have defined themselves, and this term is so ill-defined, but as sanctuary. We could call it maybe safe haven. I don't even know what to call it anymore. SLO County is not a sanctuary county. I don't think any cities in SLO are sanctuary cities.
At this point, no.
At this point. But talk us through how the challenge that presents for law enforcement.
Well, I think one of the challenges is, first of all, the lack of understanding what the definition is.
Like what I said,
yeah.
right.
And that's clear. I think it's largely, in cases of the city, a symbolic move to say that, hey, we want people calling our law enforcement, reporting and interacting with law enforcement, and our law enforcement won't call ICE and say, hey, this person is illegal.
Can we talk about that, sir? Because that is one area where the early reporting suggests that once the Trump administration took power, that individuals, specifically of Latino descent, have been very wary about interacting with law enforcement. We know that, documented or not, anecdotally, folks don't want to even be witnesses. We hear that victims of crimes who are of Latino descent aren't reporting those crimes, even if they're documented. And so is that of concern to you? Because look, relations with your community is so critical to solve crime.
Right. 100% critical. And I think that's the value of separation of power. That's why you have the federal government doing immigration and us doing local crime and really identifying and contact with victims. When a victim is reluctant to report it, they could be re-victimized because of that reason in itself.
Or a witness for that matter.
Absolutely. So I think for us, yes, I value the separation of those powers, and I value the fact that we can build community relations, that there is not that fear. And I think when the message came down from the federal administration, from the president, that local law enforcement was going to be empowered to do this and partner with us, that's where the fear came from. And it was understandable, but that's prohibited now.
But here's the challenge. I don't know that people understand those nuances. And so, would it be so bad for the state or a county or a city to make it very clear that we are not going to interact with immigration, and if you want to call it sanctuary or safe haven or whatever it is, so you can do your job?
Yes, I mean, I think that's a very good point. I think the issue itself is really making it clear in a different way. It's educating the public, and every time I speak to a group on this issue, it's an education process where they don't understand what the limitations of the law are, what the case decisions are, and what we really do as our main mission. And really our interaction, having a jail, is really dealing with the violent offender and keeping our community safe. We do not want to release a violent offender after serving their time for a conviction back into our community if they're in this country illegally.
Right.
So I think
and most wouldn't as well.
Right, and I think you're right. I think that the message is that, hey, they're not condoning it necessarily. They're saying that we want you to be able to freely report crime, be witnesses, etc., and that if we do not tell you that that's what we stand for, then you're going to fear what you're heard on television and the news and everything else, that maybe this is not a safe place to be.
And you are trying to spread that message.
Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, the majority of groups that I talk to, I spoke with the ACLU recently, a big community group last night or yesterday. It's an education process because a lot of them don't know. This hype that's going around is concerning.
He is Ian Parkinson. He is the sheriff for San Luis Obispo County, where we are today. My name is Brad Pomerance. Thank you so much for joining us on Local Edition.